everyone, and welcome into First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolf. That's the Hall of Famer, Chris Carter. That is Nick Wrights. Hey, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning. Today, we got a great show for you. We're going to get to Kevin Durant making yet more enemies on social media. What did he do before Twitter? Plus, Dez Bryant might be joining the Browns. A Dwight Howard conversation between these two you are going to want to hear. We got it started earlier. We'll finish it on the show. But we are going to start with the return of one Andrew Luck. Yes, I said the word return. As kids' summer camps wind down, NFL training camps, they are just gearing right up. For the Colts, this one's a big one. They reported yesterday with all eyes on quarterback Andrew Luck. New head coach Frank Reich said Luck will play in the Colts preseason opener at Seattle on August 9th. Circle the calendars. That will be the first time in a long time. Luck hasn't thrown a pass in a game since January 1st, 2017. Boy, Colts could sure use him after a 4-12 disappointing season last year. Chris Carter, how hard will it be for Luck to return to form?
Oh, it's very, very difficult. Playing football, and we've seen in the last few years with the NFL and the new changes with the collective bargaining agreement, we have seen the efficiency that teams are able to operate or the lack of efficiency, especially early in the season. We would consider the first four games, the first month of the season, almost an extended preseason. The quality of football is not as good. Football is only a game that you get better playing. Now, you're talking about a guy that had his shoulder misdiagnosed or mismanaged and then operated on, almost a year's rehab. Yes, we know how difficult this game is. We can't just think that Andrew Luck, with all his talent, that he's going to, just go right from when he was at the prime of his career. No, it's going to take some time. And besides that, new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new system, and besides one receiver, T.Y. Hilton, there ain't nothing. Ain't nobody going to be open. They say T.Y. is always open. No. They don't have receivers. Now, they're really dependent on the free agent, Eric Ebron. He's a high draft pick from Detroit. They gave up onto him, didn't sign him to his fifth-year option. So he is a talent. So if he doesn't emerge with a 80-catch season, I don't see how Andrew Luck, with this depleted wide receiving core. Now, I expect his shoulder to get back close to healthy, but the wide receiving core and the lack of weapons, lack of a running game, which he's always struggled with there in Indy, how does he do it, and how slow is that process?
Before I get to my expectations, I want to say this. This is great news for football fans, that Andrew Luck's rehab actually this time has gone according to schedule. We on this show, we tried to be very careful when it seemed like people were freaking out that he wasn't throwing the regulation football yet. We said, listen, they have laid out what they think the schedule should be. Mm-hmm. He keeps hitting the check marks.
Because he skipped steps the first time around, and that's what got him into this position.
It seems to have certainly led to at least part of it. 100%, Jenna. And so this is the latest and the most critical benchmark that he's going to be able to play in the first preseason game, that he is now a full go at training camp. So because football is better the higher number of high-level players there are, particularly at this position. Mm-hmm. And this guy was supposed to be, when he came into the league, at some point, the highest-level player at this position in the league. Like, yes. That's what his draft profile was, and that's what he was tracking towards. And I also want to say that the Andrew Luck story has colored the way I do my job a little bit, because it has taught me in real time, sometimes when there seems to be something off with a guy, it's not always because, oh, he's just not as good as everyone thought. It's because he's playing through something. Because Andrew Luck didn't want to say I'm hurt, didn't want to talk about the injury. But in 2015, he wasn't himself. Mm-hmm. In 2016, he was good, but not like what you'd think prime of your career, elite level quarterback would be. But he was playing through something there as well. If he was a 96 quarterback rating, 4,200 yards passing in 2016 when he wasn't fully healthy, right?
Yes, wasn't at his best.
So even if he's rusty, if he is fully healthy, if that's what he can do with a damaged shoulder, I'm excited to see what he can do with this Colts team this year with a healthy shoulder for the first time in years. But C's point, I mean, I was looking at their wide receiver depth chart, and I saw, wait, Ryan Grant? It's like, listen, I cover the NFL for a living. The Ryan Grant I'm familiar with was a running back in Green Bay. I had to go to his page. I was like, oh, he was a receiver in Washington last year. He was their big free agent acquisition at the wide receiver position. Oh, did they upgrade the running back spot? No, it's still, I mean, they took a fourth-round running back, Nyheim Hines, and then Marlon Mack. He doesn't have a lot of weapons. They drafted him that offensive lineman, which is critical. They spent their top 10 pick on Quentin Nelson, but the weaponry, other than T.Y. Hilton, is not there, which has been a theme for his career.
Well, I would imagine if they had to choose where they were going to put stock in what they were going to draft, it would be to protect Andrew Luck first and foremost, and then figure out who they're going to throw to. So we use words like rusty, we use words like excited for him to get back, but what are realistic expectations? Like, I know the first 4 games of the preseason, even the first couple games of the regular season, it's going to be a little bit of a slow go to get him back into rhythm. What do you expect from him from this season?
Realistically, at the end of the season, he's going to throw for 4,000 yards, around 28 touchdowns. It doesn't matter how many interceptions, but what becomes more important is not those numbers. It's the other numbers that we've seen. When he came into the league in 2012, no quarterback has been hit as many times as him or pressured. He went through a stint in 2014 where on drop-back attempt passes, no one was pressured more than him. So we're talking about a great quarterback. We're talking about his weapons and everything. But the book on the Colts, before this new regime took over, when you play them, go after the quarterback. Their offensive line's not that good. Yeah, they got some good weapons. I think they're going to miss Dante Moncrief, who went in free agency, went to Jacksonville. But go after the quarterback. And until the Colts are able to come up with a solution for that, that's what the NFL is going to do to Luck.
And that's why I think their draft pick was such a smart one. Typically, you don't see a guard going as high as Quentin Nelson went. But no matter how athletic you are as a quarterback, and he's athletic, no matter how tough you are, you cannot avoid pressure up the middle. Like, you can, if your tackle gets beat, I understand that's bad, but pressure up the middle, that's the hardest thing to avoid. They got a blue chip guard in Quentin Nelson out of Notre Dame.
Yeah, even better than that. I'm not even going to say blue chip. Like, this kid's going to be an all-pro player for a long, long time. Okay. He was a monster in college football. You're talking about overall athleticism you typically don't see from a guard. And also, he is a huge man. But they got it right in getting him. Kind of a hometown product. They're from Notre Dame, be able to help out that Colts and their interior offensive line.
But one other thing about that hit stat, because I saw your friends at Pro Football Focus tweeted out something similar and you retweeted it this week. So I was looking into it a little bit. Some of that has been bad offensive line play. Some of that has been what Coach Mangini talks about with Luck, which is he holds on to the ball.
Good point.
He is so dead set on trying to make the play. Like, you respect the mentality that he has not, at least he hadn't demonstrated the ability, you know what, just get rid of the football. Throw it away and avoid the hits.
One of the things, Jenna, he's a great guy. I mean, he's a great leader, but he has that old mentality that I'm going to go down with the ship, compared to just throwing it out of bounds, checking it down, and live to fight another day.
And he is the ship. That's what he's got to realize. Like, there is no path from here to there that does not involve a healthy Andrew Luck. Like, so it is not. It might be valiant from like a machismo standpoint, but it's not helpful from a football standpoint. You don't criticize guys for toughness, and you actually applaud them for it. But for your quarterback, you want smart toughness. And he has, some of those hits are not his fault. Some of those hits he could have avoided, but he holds on to the ball.
With Andrew Luck back in the fold now, the Colts are in the conversation as, you know, one of the great teams in the AFC South now. How competitive is this division going to be now?
Oh, it's going to be a great division. We get J.J. Watt to come back in Houston. We know what that defense is capable of doing. All eyes on Deshaun Watson as far as the offense. Can he repeat that short stint we had last year? Blake Bortles, man, he's going to keep us on the end of our seat with that team in Jacksonville. They're the most talented. Tennessee Titans, no one's talking about them. They made the playoffs last year. And you got what they call one of the great prospects now being back healthy, and Andrew Luck coming back. It's an exciting division.
Listen, you have the team in Jacksonville that made the AFC Championship game despite their quarterback, I would argue. And then you have the 3 other teams in the division, all of which I feel will be drastically better at quarterback this year than last year. Mariota actually regressed a little bit last year. It was surprising. Jameis Winston continued on the ascent, if you on the field at least, but Mariota regressed. The Colts obviously didn't have Luck. The Texans only had Watson for a half dozen games. Like, that division, everyone got better except for maybe Jacksonville, at least at the quarterback spot.
And something you'll appreciate, Jenna, 2 rookie coaches going into the first year of Vrabel and my man in Indianapolis, Frank Wright. So you're going into your second year. They're rookies, though.
So I'm better than them.
Well, more experienced at this.
It's a
you set me up, and I
down.
yammed it in with this.
There
all
you
good.
go.
All right, thank you. All right, we are just getting started.
We're getting there.
On a Thursday morning here. You got it? Coming up, which team is about to sign Dez Bryant? Can you believe one's going to actually do it? That is next.
Maybe.
First things first.
Or might.
Big ol' maybe. Hey, last time I checked, it was July 26th. Also, last time I checked, Dez Bryant was still unemployed. But that might be short-lived. The Cleveland Browns have had discussions about bringing in Dez with Josh Gordon absent from training camp. The team is down a wide receiver. Dez is a wide receiver. Pieces could be fitting together. All right, C, would bringing in Dez be a good idea for this Cleveland Browns team?
Well, Jenna, first I got to apologize. I can't remember the exact date that Dez got cut. But right after we had some report and said, oh, man, I got 6 teams, I think someone reported. I'm not going to say his name. Works NFL Network.
I think it was Rap Sheet.
Yeah, I don't know who
I'm
it
not
is.
sure.
But
probably.
It was like, and I was like, I don't know if there's 6 teams out there, like, because I hear some of the information. So I didn't think there were going to be 6 teams. I knew Dez's asking price was not. He was going to be trying to take some type of discount. But time went a little bit, a couple of weeks, and Jenna was like, hey, that's Dez Bryant. Like, I was like, oh, don't worry about it, Jenna. Like, and I'm supposed to be all things, the football almanac for you and everything. Then you came to me a little bit later and was like, Dez not signed. This don't really seem right, Chris. And I was like, no, he's just, right now, Baltimore wanted him, and he turned down their contract. Jenna, we're past the 4th of July. It's time to be concerned because almost all of the good players are playing on a team, even a 1-year deal. So now that we're talking about Dez Bryant and he's unattached to a team, that has a great deal of concern. Now, there's also concern for Josh Gordon because for another general manager to mention wide receivers that we're looking at options, because if Josh had something that they didn't think could be suspendable, they wouldn't be looking. They would be looking at other ways to get him help compared to looking at ways to replace him.
Or they would be looking at players who are not vested veterans that if they're on the opening day roster, their contract's not guaranteed.
And
they
have more flexibility.
Like if they thought, listen, it's going to be
for a permanent replacement or at least a replacement for the year when you start looking at the players like Dez Bryant.
Which is concerning for Josh. Like, period, whether it's because they're worried about him being suspended or whether it's simply even if he's not going to be suspended, if they're worried if he's going to be healthy enough to be able to play football anytime soon, it is concerning to be looking at a veteran such as this one. But to the point on the front end, the only quality players that aren't on NFL rosters right now are either being blackballed by the league or they're named Dez Bryant. Like, or they've retired. You know what I mean?
Why, Nick? Why do you think it is he hasn't been signed by a team?
I think whatever intel was out there about Dez was worse than I could have imagined. Listen, we knew Dez was an edge guy. We knew that when he got to Dallas, the Cowboys hired someone to essentially be his chaperone. We knew there had been long-standing rumors about a horrible video from years back in a parking lot. But it also seemed like, okay, a lot of that stuff seems to have gone away. And as long as you can deal with the histrionics on the sidelines, that's really all that comes along with Dez Bryant. We didn't hear about a lot of the family drama. We didn't hear about any arrest. But whatever the intel is about either what he is in the facility or how much management he needs once you leave your facility, you've got 30-some-odd teams that have said, nah, we good. And I was looking at this yesterday, some of the teams that we have high hopes for that just don't have talent at the receiver position. The one that you initially pegged Dez to, San Francisco. How about them?
Right.
Even if we don't have high hopes for the New York Jets, a team that is going to be having a rookie quarterback.
The one he left. They have no wide receivers.
The one we just talked about.
Thank you. Yes.
Indianapolis. And so now we're in a position where Cleveland, they might have an emergency at the position. But I then circle back to the reason he's unemployed, which is, man, I just put my whole future, my franchise in Baker Mayfield. Does Dez make Baker's job easier or harder? Does Dez make Baker's path to being a star quarterback in this league easier or harder? And that is one that the Browns are going to have to answer John Dorsey and company behind closed doors, because that's the question that matters for them.
Right. I have enough confidence in who Cleveland has there. Recently hired offensive coordinator Todd Haley. Now, Todd Haley has had some wide receivers that are special. Todd has no problem dealing with them. If you talk about what was his relationship with Ben Roethlisberger, man, he's going to coach you. I don't care how good you are, and sometimes Ben did not like that. So Dez Bryant being in Cleveland with Todd Haley as the offensive coordinator, Hugh Jackson, who was a wide receiver coach, that's how he cut his teeth in the NFL, and being an offensive coordinator. I believe that combination can cultivate to bring the best out of Dez for this year. Now, this might surprise you guys. I don't think Dez is better than Josh Gordon.
No.
I thought Josh Gordon was going to have the kind of year and surprise a lot of people, because his ability to be able to run through coverage, his overall size and speed, opposite of Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry, man, he's 9.9 yards a catch.
Right.
They just gave him that
high
money.
volume.
So I don't know if Dez, being a possession receiver, and that's not a slap in the face. I'm a possession receiver, all right? That's what I never took that as people were trying to slight my ability. But having two possession receivers, it's not the best for an offense, but an offensive coordinator has got to be really, really creative when you don't have guys that can really force the defense to back off.
You mentioned Todd Haley. So I know Todd. I have a relationship with Todd back from when we were both in Kansas City together. And you're right. There are some great wide receivers that love Todd Haley. Larry Fitzgerald, give him maybe I'm overstating when I say love it, but Larry Fitzgerald has
Larry's very, very fond of how Todd coached
him and feels like he got the most out of him.
Yes.
But Larry also bought in. And it was hard for Larry to buy in initially, from what I understand. I know Dwayne Bowe did not like Todd Haley. I know it got so bad that Dwayne Bowe's agent had to call the GM about how Todd Haley was talking to him. And I say that to say this, man, when's the last time Dez Bryant was coached hard? We just heard that he wasn't taught the route tree. When's the last time a coach actually felt emboldened to actually get in Dez Bryant's grill? That's one that if he were to go to Cleveland, he better be ready for.
And one good example was Keyshawn Johnson when he played with the Jets. Todd Haley coached him, rode him really, really hard, and doing television and working with Key, man, we'd have a question. He called Todd. He had Todd on speed dial. Be able to call Todd, and they have a great rapport and a great respect. So you have seen there are some wide receivers. Dwayne Bowe didn't gravitate to that hard coaching. Todd comes from old school football. I'm a coach old school, and I believe that it's the best way to coach, and especially coaching us wide receivers, because we tends to have some issues.
Yeah, you do. We should mention this hasn't happened yet, but there are talks that Cleveland will go after Dez Bryant. All right, coming up, Kevin Durant keeps making enemies, stirring up controversy, doing his thing. That's next. This is First Things First. Vince Carter is 41 years old, but he's not done with basketball quite yet. He agreed to a one-year, $2.5 million deal to sign with the Hawks. Vinsanity will be playing in his 21st season. Nick, how remarkable has Vince's longevity been?
Man, I would wish for everyone to love their job the way Vince Carter loves his.
Yes.
He's got hundreds of millions of dollars. He's got President Obama on speed dial. He has the ability to do anything he wants. He just wants to keep doing what he's been doing his whole life. God bless him, man. I mean, he's obviously nothing close to the player he was before, but he knows that. And he's fine with that. He just wants to keep hooping. I love this guy.
Yeah, Vince will always be special to me. My brother coached Toronto when Vince came into the league.
Yeah.
So seeing him develop, if you would have thought after seeing Vince how explosive he was, well, this guy's going to play over 20 years. You've been like, no, he's not going to be able to jump like that for 20 years. Man, he's been able to do it. It's a really testament, though, to his heart. His heart is in basketball, and that's why he's playing. It's not the money.
Has anyone been in the league longer than Vince Carter?
Well, Dirk is going into year 21 as well. Those are the two longest tenured players right now.
All right, the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles kick off camp today, and quarterback Carson Wentz will be there. Wentz, who hasn't played since Week 14 of last season after suffering ACL and LCL tears, will avoid the PUP list. CeCe, how encouraging is this for Wentz and the Eagles?
It's very encouraging to the medical staff. I'm sure it's very encouraging to Carson, because Now he's the quarterback of this Super Bowl team. But it also lets you know where the rehab is. Because let's not forget, they got Nick Foles right there as a proven veteran. If there was any question that he's not ready, they would just start him on the pup and have Nick start the season, the preseason as the starter. But it lets you know how the knee has progressed through the offseason.
And you can start training camp on the pup list and come off at any time.
Absolutely.
It's not like that. It's not like starting the regular season on pup where you miss 6 weeks. So this means he is right on schedule, if not a little bit ahead of schedule, which is obviously outstanding news for Philadelphia.
All right, moving on. Christian McCaffrey averaged just over 12 touches a game last season, but head coach Ron Rivera says, 12? I'll see your 12 and raise you. Rivera said, that was a gambling reference.
Yep, I got it.
Might have been blackjack. Rivera said McCaffrey can hopefully get the ball 25 to 30 times this year. 25 to 30. See, is that a fair expectation for McCaffrey in his sophomore season?
Nope. Absolutely not. Like, he's not built for that. No, there's no running back.
I was about to say,
who is built for yesterday, if the coach would have told us, Sean McVay, I gave Todd Gurley that money, I'm getting ready to have him touch the ball 30 times, would have been like, what? For what reason? I mean, Jason Garrett, hey, Ezekiel Elliott's going to touch it 30. Whoa. For what? Like, why are you going to do that? He's not going to make it through the season healthy. And
what's a good number?
I would say 20 times.
Yeah, 20 touches a game.
I would say 14 to 15 carries and 5 or 6 touches out of the backfield. But listen, this is influenced not by the head coach, but by the offense coordinator, Norv Turner. He loves to run the football.
I would also say might be influenced a little bit by that draft position, trying to make sure that top 10 pick has the production of a top 10 pick.
Yes.
All right, remember when Julio Jones wasn't going to be at training camp? Well, he and the Falcons agreed on a contract adjustment, and the two-time first-team All-Pro will be at camp today. See, how big is this for the Falcons?
It's huge for the Falcons. They need Julio there. They are a Super Bowl contender with him and Matty Ice being their number one, the quarterback, that relationship they have. But Julio has deserved this. He's out of guaranteed money. If he had a bad season last year, Arthur Blank and the general manager there, they would be coming to him saying, hey, you know something, Julio, are you still one of the top guys? This is what happens in the business. I'm glad that they came to an agreement, a lot like Gronk came to with Belichick and Kraft and them last season.
And the other part of this that I had a feeling this was coming after we went off the air yesterday because the Falcons did something interesting. They gave their head coach and their GM contract extensions.
There you go.
They each had 2 years left on fully guaranteed contracts. They gave them 3-year extensions, fully guaranteed through 2022. I don't think, even if you know you're going to do that, you don't do that publicly. You don't let that out unless you know we're going to work something out with Julio. Because it's one thing for Julio to see Matt Ryan get paid and these other receivers, when he's like, hold on. Like, would Dan Quinn be getting this contract extension if I wasn't Julio Jones? You're not going to I have no guaranteed money left and 3 years left on my deal. His deal's fully guaranteed. You never get hurt coaching, and you're going to give him an extension? Like, no. This isn't. So it is probably that we don't know the details of it. My guess is because he's only making $10.5 million in salary this year, 12.5 next year, 11.5 after that, and given his production, that is way below market. I'm guessing they'll give him essentially a roster bonus now, prorated over the course, and maybe a new deal, a fully new deal next offseason.
Yeah, it's probably a combination of a roster bonus and also an incentive package that they know Julio can reach. So then that brings what he's going to make annually this year up. They said that they didn't mind, negotiating the last 2 years of the deal, but he had 3 years on it.
Right.
So this right here will get them to that mark, and then they'll redo another deal.
And this is clearly win-win for both sides. This Falcons team needs Julio on that field if they're going to have any success this year, and he wanted to be there.
This franchise is in good shape.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to Kevin Durant now, where it is deja vu all over again. KD is mired in yet another controversy. He joined Blazers guard C.J. McCollum's podcast Pull Up this week, and he wanted to make one thing clear about Portland's chances next season. Take a listen.
You know you guys aren't going to win a championship.
Bro, we have the team. We have capabilities. Anything is possible. We can win a championship, bro.
I mean, let's be honest.
Bro, we can win a championship. Anything is possible.
I just need to look. I need more. I mean, I like y'all. I like y'all too. You're hard to stop. But, I mean, come on. You can't be upset about this.
I can be upset because Cuz was a free agent, which means he could have. This is why I was upset. He could have came to Portland. His agent and Nurk have the same agents. So I'm thinking, okay, you ain't gonna come to us, whatever. Why you gotta go there? Cause y'all only paid him $5 million. We had 12 to 15 million in cap.
No way it's happening. Y'all, it ain't gonna be no. It's gotta have a nice yin and yang, bro. It's gonna be too much of one thing with y'all. So stop that.
So what do you suggest?
I suggest you just keep playing, man, and don't worry about what goes on at the top of things.
So
It keeps
rude.
going.
All right, so the feud spilled onto Twitter, because that's where you go if you're really upset, starting with Big Cat from Barstool Sports asking permission from McCollum to call Kevin Durant the B word again.
Which goes back to a podcast they did together with CJ, where CJ scolded him for calling Kevin Durant that. That's where that tweet comes from. Go ahead, Jenna.
To which McCollum wrote, quote, "I still think the B word is harsh and shouldn't be used. He knows that decision was soft, but I respect it. It's like getting jumped with your brothers by a gang you should have beat, then joining the gang that jumped you and your brothers 2 months later and forgetting about your brothers." To which Durant responded, "So I would get into a gang fight, lose, plot on my brother for 2 months in our home, and then go get the gang we lost to and beat him up? You think that low of me, CJ? I just did your bleeping podcast. Snakes in the grass, boy, I tell you, Nick. What did you make of this?" And can I just tell you, I don't do podcasts. My advice to anyone that will ever, has ever, or continues to do not eat while you're doing a podcast.
Okay, sure. Those guys
literally is the most annoying thing in the world.
So regardless of that aspect that we all, I think, were noticing.
Okay.
All right. First of all, credit to CJ McCollum. I've been talking about the Kevin Durant decision for 2 years. I'm paid to talk. He came up with the perfect analogy off the cuff on Twitter in 2 minutes.
2 seconds.
And Kevin Durant took the analogy literally. He's like, "You're saying I'm going to join a gang and fight my brothers? Like, what are you talking?" No. It's an analogy, and it's almost a perfect one. You had your crew. You should have won. You had them down. The guys that beat you. You then looked at your crew and said, "I'm just going to join that crew and never talk to those guys again." And, in fact, talk bad about that crew on the streets, which is what Kevin Durant did.
And plot their demise in the house with them.
Right, absolutely. Right. As while we are preparing for the initial fight, I'm calling the other crew. In case this fight don't go well for me, I'm going to join up with y'all.
You guys are good if I come, right?
But the other part of this that is so credit to CJ. But what's infuriating, and this is why the Durant move will always bother me, and the Cousins move is just salt in the wound. And people would say, "Oh, he's quit being a fan." I am a fan, and I do care, and it does bother me, is because what Kevin Durant was saying on that podcast was correct. Kevin Durant was like, "Hey, guess what, Blazers, 3 seed in the West, 49 wins, an All-NBA guard in Lillard, a future All-NBA guard in McCollum. You could have added an All-NBA center. Still wouldn't have been good enough. Eat that. How's that feel?" That's what the new NBA is since I went over to Golden State. And I can just laugh about it and giggle about it and say, don't you, the 3 seed in the West, worry about what's going on up top of the league. Because up top of the league is just this team. It was dismissive. He, later in the podcast, told CJ to get out of his feelings, which is the definition of irony, Kevin Durant telling anyone to get out of his feelings. And then Durant did what he always does, which is takes to Twitter to argue with people, argue with Nate Jones, argue with CJ, argue with other random people. And so I'm not surprised at any of this from Durant. I credit CJ for nailing exactly what happened. And, this is just what we need to come to expect from Kevin Durant.
That's just what I was going to start with. You don't have to apologize. We're thinking the same way. I mean, that's not, I have to slap myself.
Not great for you?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
But I think this is good. We're not going to like it, but I think this is just going to be normal for Kevin Durant. Just as easy as he was dismissive of CJ. He had no type of perspective about what's going on, the optics of how people look at him in Golden State. He was like, so what? You shouldn't, give me some advice. You've been in this league longer than me. You're a champion now. You shouldn't worry about what's going on at the top. Well, let's just be more dismissive.
Right.
I don't understand, because I know how my career went. And I know I had good relationships with Michael Irvin and Jerry Rice, and both of those guys won multiple championships right in my heyday. And never once were they ever dismissive about my hopes and dreams about winning. They could have easily been. Hey, Chris, how's it doing over there with Jim McMahon? How you doing? What about a guy named Spurgeon Wynn, the lowest passing rating ever in the history of the NFL? How's that going for you, Chris? You know something, Chris? You should stop training. You should don't even be worried about what we're doing over here at the top.
And those are great. Those are not quite one-to-one, but those are great examples. Because
in Dallas and San Francisco are trying to decide which one of y'all going to get Deion Sanders next. Well, there we go. Well, that's what they need. They all need some help like that.
Right.
But yesterday, we sat on this program and talked about how Joe Lacob, the owner of the Warriors, came out and said, hey, we're still hungry. We're still fighting for this. We have to try really hard. But then when you listen to what someone like KD
I don't know
said,
if that's what Joe Lacob said. Joe Lacob said we're not done. Joe Lacob said that
we're still hungry.
Sure, but he said wait till we see what comes next. And Lacob, I guess I give him credit. Before they got Durant, he said we're light years ahead of the rest of the NBA. Myself and others all laughed when light years turned into a 3-1 blown lead in the finals, but it ended up working out because they added Kevin Durant. But I want to say something else about Kevin Durant. Because one of the other tweets he sent we didn't put on the show is he's like, oh, I guess because I'm in the NBA, I'm not allowed to use Twitter. Kevin Durant, I don't think, realizes how famous he is. Because I was trying to think about people at Durant's level of fame.
It's either that or he's not comfortable being famous.
It's bizarre
no
because
self-awareness.
Prior to this, and it didn't make the show because at this point, like Cece said, it's not even news. There was a blog post a few days ago about how KD has just been responding to anyone in the DMs. Yeah. That anyone that talks trash to him, he responds to him. Like, I am a Z-list celebrity. I don't even want to call myself a celebrity, but I'm somebody, right? But 1% of Kevin Durant. Yesterday, I checked my mentions for the first time in a while, and I got a tweet from someone saying, Nick, the only reason you're on television is because Chris Carter is sleeping with and married to your sister. Which I was like, well, that's an interesting internet rumor. Like, I don't know whether that's intriguing to me because none of it's true. Like, Chris never met my sister. He's married to somebody else. But somewhere on the internet, like, that is being said about someone at my level of notoriety. Kevin Durant is one of the 3 most famous basketball players in the world. He's one of the 20 most famous athletes in the world. Mm-hmm. You cannot engage at that level, not because you're in the NBA, because you are who you are. You got 19 million Twitter followers, bro. Like, you're going to drive yourself crazy responding to everyone that wants to make things up about you, right? Like, you have an idea, see, of, like, what that level of fame is like, but I would argue, like, when you were at the, when you were at the top of the NFL, this stuff didn't exist. The only way someone could talk trash to you would be in person.
Right, but you're never going to win. I mean, you're a professional athlete, second best player in the world, and you can't win these types of battles. Like, there's a certain amount of respect that I just expect KD to have for the game and for the guys playing the game. It's hard to be a professional athlete. It's hard to be able to win. Like, but I'm not going to disrespect guys. I'm not going to do that to CJ. And, man, CJ McCollum is a world-class guy. He was on our show. Guy sent us all wine and everything. Like, we know a lot of people. They don't act like him. All right? He's not some big-time 5-star recruit. No, he built his own career. And he's trying to do something from a podcast standpoint in the broadcasting space and does a good job. So CJ didn't deserve that. Now, I can understand if he was on a podcast and they were just talking trash to a guy, going back and forth. If it was Lance Stevens or someone like that, JaVale McGee,
sure,
someone like that, I could understand. But know who you're talking to also.
But it also speaks to the fact that all KD's ever said that he's wanted was to just play video games and practice and play basketball. That's all I want to do is play basketball. He's so insecure that he can't just play basketball. He cannot stay in that lane, the lane that he preaches he wants to be in all the time, because he's so concerned with what everyone else thinks.
And I'm just so tired of some of my colleagues that take it as if that before the Twitter thing happened, they played this clip was going viral, and people were talking about how awesome this was from Kevin Durant, like how hilarious and how awesome it was. Like there is supposed to be a level of grace and dignity and respect amongst peers that you, in any field, that you would not go into someone else's house, which is CJ's podcast, and laugh at him because you're the more powerful, successful, richer, more famous guy. Like, it's just not a nice way to act. And then to act as if CJ's tweet makes him a snake. Like, oh, I went on your bleeping podcast. Hey, you went on my podcast. I invited you to my house, and you ripped up the carpet.
And
Like
let's not forget he also was eating. You have a big
I don't know
problem
who
with
was
the
eating.
food.
In Durant's defense, that might have been
chomp.
CJ eating.
I couldn't understand a darn thing because of all that chewing. Hey, coming up, is Jason Garrett on the hot seat?
Who you calling?
Cece's on the phone. Wait till you hear what Jerry Jones has to say next on First Things First.
Baby, I didn't know you Nick's sister.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Man, the internet, man.
Welcome back to First Things First. Our good friend, former NFL head coach, Eric Mangini is here. Hey, Eric.
See you, Coach.
Good morning. Good to see everybody.
Nice to have you in.
I'm waiting for what your evaluation was.
No, I was actually just looking at the design on the shirt. I like shirts with prints and patterns, and I like that
Yeah,
quite a bit.
So do I. I spent a lot of time thinking about that.
That is full sarcasm.
Prints and patterns.
The Dallas Cowboys coach reported to training camp yesterday. Lots of questions surrounding this team after missing the playoffs last year. How will Dak bounce back from a tough sophomore season? How will the team replace Dez and Witten? Is Jason Garrett on the hot seat? Hot seats are never fun. Jerry Jones met with the media yesterday and discussed just that.
Everybody here knows I'll take a risk with anybody. But I also would like for you to review pragmatic decisions, some pretty logical type decisions as well, absent the risk. All of this weighs in it. I see as close, Stephen, we see as better than anybody in the world, Jason. Better than anybody. And consequently, I'm excited about him being our head coach.
What's up, C?
Consequently,
There you go. I knew it.
he'd never be on the hot seat. Me
Brewing.
and Steven.
Say it,
There's no
Coach.
one that would have a view of Jason the way we do. Coach, do you think that Jason Garrett in this year that he'd be on the hot seat there with the Dallas Cowboys?
Well, Jerry, I never heard him say he wasn't on the hot seat. I just heard him say that he has the best view of the decisions that he makes and the pragmatic decisions, and that he respects those decisions. But at this point, you've made a pretty big transition. You've changed up the quarterback. You've made a commitment to the offensive line. You've
Changed out some of the coaches underneath him.
Not some. I mean, it
bunch.
was a overhaul of the coaching staff. So you've had that opportunity. You've had continuity. You've had the chance to be there for a long time and make a lot of decisions that shape this organization. They've got to make some sort of jump here, and they've got to show it may not be the Super Bowl, but they've got to show that that's where they're trending, and that maybe it's a piece here or a piece there. And going into training camp, there's a team that you hope to be, and then coming out of training camp, there's a team that you realize you have to be, and that's the important thing that they need to do is understand who they are coming out of training camp, and make sure that's the way they go into the season.
Is Jason Garrett's success tied into Dak Prescott's success this year? Will he go as Dak Prescott goes?
Yeah, absolutely. And the part of removing Dez was the idea that they want, I forget the quote, they want the receivers to run the exact routes, or I forget how it was phrased. But if that's going to be the way it is, where it's precision routes, it's pure coverage based, and look, I like that. They've got to make it work, and they've got a group of receivers that you don't know whether they can get open when the game is on the line. You don't know if they're going to be able to get open when it's straight man-to-man coverage. You don't know if they're playing from behind, how well that group's going to respond. And if they can't do it very well, what are you going to do from a coaching perspective to help them? What formations, what plays, what are you going to design to give those guys an opportunity to be successful, understanding their shortcomings?
That is, I think, the biggest key here, and that will be Jason Garrett's biggest challenge this year, is to use a cliche, man, oh man, he's going to have to coach them up. Because you're going to have to scheme guys open. You're going to have to do things with guys that have not, I don't want to say they're under-talented, but they at least have not shown to be highly talented players in this league at your pass-catching positions, that you are going to have to get them open on Tuesday, Wednesday, when you're installing the game plan, that they can then go execute on Sunday. Because it's not going to be a whole lot of how'd that play happen. Man, Allen Hurns just blew by, beat his man, beat the safety, and he was there. And Dak delivered a perfect ball, 40 yards in the air. Like, that is going to fall on the head coach. Well, in addition to the new coordinators and the coaches, I understand all that part of it. But that's what he's got to do. This is a critical year for Dallas. because there's no fifth-year option on Dak Prescott's contract. Dak Prescott, this coming off season, probably contract extension. So off season after that, Zeke's getting one, if not sooner. Like, all of a sudden, those cheap, they're paying Dak $700,000. Like, those cheap players are about to become super expensive players. And so this is a critical moment when you have that all-pro offensive line, when you still have DeMarcus Lawrence, to go out there and try to compete in one of the toughest divisions in the NFL.
And as Coach Mangini mentioned, that one of the things before you get on the hot seat is they make you change your staff. And that's what they did with Dallas. So part of being in the spotlight or on that hot seat is you got to change your staff. And then you're judged based on what type of improvements have they made. And in changing the staff, they're doing it without a lot of veteran leadership, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So now, with Jason being a former backup quarterback, Jason hadn't really cut his teeth on offense or on defense, and that becomes a problem with an identity as a coach. Well, is he going to upgrade the offense, or is he going to have a huge influence? I don't think he's going to have an influence on the defense because they really respect their defensive coordinator. But the one thing about Dallas is tricky. Jerry made a lot of mistakes in reacting early in his career as an owner. Now, as he's gotten older in season, he likes Jason because he believes Jason can handle being the Dallas Cowboys coach. And he likes the relationship that they personally have. Now, is Jerry Jones willing to invite someone else to take over that team? See, I don't think Jerry is as interested in that as people think he is. So I think people put Jason Garrett more on the hot seat than Jerry Jones. I think Jerry, even though he has pressure there in Dallas, I don't think there's the pressure from the ownership on Jason like people would think that a team that hasn't been to the playoffs.
And when you look at the way that this team is formed, they do have an outstanding offensive line. They've committed to it financially. They've got an outstanding running back. They should be able to control games in the running game. And what that should do is get an eighth person down the box, which means the safety is down close to the line of scrimmage. And that should open up some things outside. Is it going to be perfect? No, but having a substantial running game and then being able to run play action, meaningful play action off of that, because they do have to honor the run threat, that should open things up. It's more when you're behind or when the whole world knows that you have to throw the ball and the receivers have to run a route and get open. That's where the problems start coming in, when you can't supplement it with other parts of the offense.
CeCe, what does it mean to be coach of the Dallas Cowboys? You said Jerry Jones wants someone who knows how to be coach. What does that mean?
Well, from a media standpoint, the interviews, the Dallas media can be difficult because of the expectations. It's a large market. Jerry Jones is the general manager. So Jerry, sometimes as far as football, he's going to think that he knows more than you. And then Jerry's backup as the general manager happens to be Jerry's son. So it becomes difficult when you're talking to your boss, who's the owner, and then the guy who has the number one position, the general manager.
It's his son.
He's his son. So it becomes, what do I say? How much do I really tell him? And how much control does the head coach in Dallas have as far as the overall personnel decisions, which I don't believe is significant?
Who's the voice of the New England Patriots?
Bill Belichick.
Okay, who's the voice of the...
I was trying to figure out, is there
No. Who's the voice...
Gotcha.
Whoa! I never thought of that.
I'm leading something. Who's the voice of the Kansas City Chiefs? Andy Reid. I would say. The voice of the Green Bay Packers, probably Mike McCarthy, right? Who's the voice of the Dallas Cowboys? Jerry Jones. And I think this is a key component. Remember, he fired Jimmy Johnson after winning a couple Super Bowls, because guess who the voice and the face of the Cowboys was? Jimmy
Johnson.
And by the way, Bill Parcells had a good run there. They got him to the playoffs his last year there. The right after that, one thing that has been good for Jason Garrett is, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, he's absolutely known his place in the organization. And I think there are some coaches that would not always like the fact that the final voice publicly is always going to be Jerry Jones. And I think Jerry likes that Jason is very comfortable with that.
I think the other thing that is a positive in Dallas is, you know that the owner's involved in Dallas. There's a lot of places where the owner doesn't say anything, but they're very involved. And as a head coach, you got to go up to the podium and say, hey, I think this is a really great idea. When in the back of your mind, no, this isn't a good idea. I'm being totally forced to do this, but I've got to say what a great idea it is. Boss. And then when it fails, it's like, yeah maybe
you advocated for it.
Maybe I should have made a different decision.
All right, we got to take a break, Coach. We'll see you a little bit later in the show. Coming up, will the addition of Melo actually make the Rockets worse? It's next on First Things First. Welcome back to First Things First. Former NBA head coach and current Big East Associate Commissioner Stu Jackson is in the building. Stu, we're going to abbreviate that and make you the CBEAC, Stu Jackson.
That's a heck of an acronym. I've never been described like that.
Commissioner Stu Jackson.
All right.
Such an important.
I'm going to call him Stu. Get him on
who
the
you
phone.
calling? Who you calling today, Stu? I'm about to during the break. I was peeping your password on your phone. I'm just going to steal a few numbers from that. That's all.
Melo, hold on. All right,
Welcome
speaking
back,
of which,
man.
yes, Carmelo Anthony is on the verge of joining his fourth team in a year. Not a great average. The three-team trade is now official. Melo is a member of the Hawks, but he isn't house hunting in the greater Atlanta area. Hawks expected to immediately waive the 10-time All-Star, at which time he's expected to sign on with James Harden, Chris Paul, and the Houston Rockets. All right, Stu, does Melo make the Rockets better, or is it possible he makes the Rockets worse? Or maybe it depends on who you're comparing that team to.
Well, first things first. I don't believe that Carmelo makes the Houston Rockets better. And the reason is Carmelo Anthony is not what the Houston Rockets need. And I don't mean to overstate the value of role players on an NBA team, but the loss of Trevor Ariza and Luke Mabahamute from a defensive presence really is a big factor for the Houston Rockets. It kills them. They were able to last year put on the floor, and I think was a very key to the Rockets going from 18th in the league in defense to 6th in the league in defense. They're able to put on the floor P.J. Tucker, Mabahamute, as well as Trevor Ariza, and they could stop people. Look, the Houston Rockets are the only team in the West right now that seem to be a legitimate threat to the Golden State Warriors, and that is because they were first in offense, but they had the ability to stop the Golden State Warriors. Losing those two players, Ariza and Mahabute, is a huge factor. Adding Carmelo does not help their cause. It helps them offensively. The Houston Rockets were #1 in the league offensively last year. Adding Carmelo, it has no effect. We all know that Carmelo is in the twilight of his career, and defensively, that holds true as well. So, therefore, I don't think he helps that team. I think he keeps the status quo. They're a great offensive team. They've been really hurt defensively.
Now, that's if we continue, and I respect your opinion, that's if we continue to compare the 17-18 season with the 18-19 season, and it's really hard to do that with all the moving parts. Like, we can't keep analyzing Houston as if they have Ariza. They don't have them. So what are your options moving forward? Now, the team, we know, is not going to be as good as the team last year that won 65 games. We don't expect them to win 65 games. That's not as important. But I do respect the different variances for which they could win. They could either play at a pace and they could score 120, or in the games that they won, when you look at the score, what those games were, you're right. They were getting more stops.
Listen, the series against Golden State, when they got up 3-2, it wasn't because they were winning those games 125-120. It's because they were getting stops.
Right, but what can Daryl Morey and their staff, what can they do now? And right now, adding Melo, it makes the roster better because of what the options are.
And you don't listen, and Stu, you haven't had the Melo discussion with us. Chris is not a Carmelo Anthony fan nor advocate. Like, you think he's limited specifically defensively and won't necessarily know his role. But you're just saying basically an open roster spot, if you can fill it with Carmelo Anthony, you're better than having it filled with a random player X.
Right, yes. And I don't see Melo with the move of getting a buyout. I don't see something happening where a bunch of humility is going to be coming and he's going to be like, you know something, man, I'm willing to do. CP, whatever y'all need. Look, at this point in my career, I just don't think that it's that type of buy-in for a guy like Melo.
Yeah, listen, we're probably talking about two different things, because adding Carmelo Anthony at $2.4 million, given the career that he has had and how offensively gifted he is, that's a good move. I'm talking about philosophically in terms of how you're building your championship team. what they need is more defensive presence that they have lost with the loss of those other two players.
Okay, so let's talk about the loss of these other guys, because at some point, and it feels like I'm a man on an island on this, and maybe the island will sink. But at some point, the legend of Luc Mbah-a-Moute has got to calm down a bit. This is a guy who anybody in the league could have had for a league minimum last year. Yeah. They replaced him with James Ennis.
One of the things that we did last year, Nick, was they were part of the story as far as the numbers and bodies
and the volume
of wing
you could
guys
throw out there.
And we got to play 82 games.
Agreed, 100%. And Mbah-a-Moute was one of many savvy Daryl Morey findings. I don't think he will be the last one. They signed James Ennis for the same money to do that job. Mbah-a-Moute, by the way, was unplayable in the postseason, a postseason where they 1-5, were up 3-2 against Golden State.
But he did have a significant injury.
No, of course, that's what I'm saying. But they were good in the postseason despite him being unplayable. It wasn't his fault he was unplayable. He was hurt. But my point was, when they essentially lost him in the postseason, they still kept on ticking. The Ariza thing is a loss. They wanted to bring back Trevor Ariza.
It's a huge loss. And listen, I'm not focused on any one of those three players being Tucker, Ariza, or Mbah-a-Moute. I'm talking about the three of them having the ability at points in the game, points in a playoff series, to put them on the floor in the third and fourth quarter and flat out get stops, because they're not only very good defenders, the three of them, they're very versatile defenders. They can all defend multiple positions.
And so, but here's the thing about Melo and his defense, because Melo is not a good defender. Everyone knows that.
No, he's not.
But he also last year was on a team that, until Roberson went down, was 5th in the league in defense, ahead of Houston. When he was on the court with Andre Roberson, they had a 98 defensive rating. That was 4 points better than Boston's for the year. Melo, I think the key, Ariza was important. I understand that. That's a loss. They would have liked to bring him back. Phoenix gave him $15 million. They weren't going to do that. The most important part of the Rockets defense is Clint Capella. That is number one. The second most important part, I believe, is P.J. Tucker. The third most important part is Chris Paul, point guard. I don't think you can have a bad defense with those three guys still out there.
Well, this is the thing, though. All those guys, they're not individually like great defenders. P.J. Tucker's challenged by his size. He can be posted up and everything. Doesn't have great lateral quickness. Trevor Ariza, sometimes in his older age, he gets problems on the wing. Luc Richard, he's limited too. But all three of those guys, you know what they know? They know how to funnel guys to Chris Paul and to Capello. Will Melo do that? And that's the kind of stuff the intangibles, the buy-in to what we're supposed to do compared to it being based on what's on the stat sheet. They need a guy that understands defensively that we do have the shot blocker in the back.
And a quick wrinkle, if I can throw in, you're asking Melo to be this person that he may or may not be, and the guy asking is a guy he never really got along with in Mike D'Antoni. Does that factor into this at all? It's not like he's going to go in and be the same guy he was when he played with D'Antoni. He's going to have to take a lesser role from a guy who he basically got fired in New York.
Yeah, but listen, I mean, I think with D'Antoni and Carmelo, listen, there's a healthy respect there. If you look at Carmelo Anthony, the way he's handled himself throughout his career, you know, you can't fault him for anything. He handled himself well in New York. He's handled this negotiation and separation from Oklahoma City, I think, very well. Mike D'Antoni, good guy. I think there's some respect there. But listen, I love this conversation because we're really getting into nuanced, you know, NBA basketball here. And while on one hand, you can say how good defensively Oklahoma City was when Carmelo was on the floor. That's because of Roberson.
Right, but they got a Roberson in Houston. They've got a defensive player of the year candidate in Capella. They've got P.J. Tucker. They've got Chris Paul.
But it's not enough, Nick. What I'm saying is when you have three defenders like Tucker, Mbah-a-Moute, and Ariza, and the ability to put them on the floor at the same time, you are going to flat out stop people. They can't do that anymore. They can't do that any longer. And as great an off-ball defender Chris Paul is, and as good a defender as Ennis is, it's not the combination of those three, and I think it's left a significant hole in their roster that has yet to be filled.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Chris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolf. So long, everybody.